Welcome back to another Patreon episode, and in this episode we're going to look at how we can create 3 really simple Carnival games. So let's get started. Starting off with a classic horse race. So before we look at a simple version and then a more advanced version of this, pick a horse and let's see how well you do. Yeah, I had my bets on yellow, which was probably not the best choice. So let's have a look at how to create this, and yes, we will make this look a lot nicer as well. So first thing you need is a horse sprite. I found these ones online on Google Images with some slight variations of different colours, and I've got different animation names for the different colours as well. We also need a sprite for the checkered flag, and I've also set the layout size to just fill this space only. So this is by going up to here and setting the size to 854 by 480. So that's the sprites we need. We also need one more object, and that is going to be our mouse. And this is just going to be a way that we can actually pick the horse we want to use and to start the race off as well. So let's start off with a really simple version of this. In the event sheet, we're going to start by adding a global variable, and this is going to be called race started. And by default, it's going to be set to false. We're also going to add a global variable, and this one is going to take a string, and this is going to be the selected horse. So whatever horse you've selected for the race. We're then going to add an event, and this is going to be a system event. And the first thing we need to do is we do need to check if the race has started or not. And we want to check if this is false to begin with. We can also then check if our mouse has selected one of the horses. So has the race not started yet, and have you selected a horse? So once we've selected this horse, we're going to do 2 things. First thing we're going to do is go to our system requirements, and we're going to set the value of selected horse to horse.animation name. And this will take the color that we selected, the red, yellow, green, etc. Next, we're going to take that race started and we're going to start the race. So set boolean race started now to true. Now the race has started, we actually need the code that gets the horses to move. And this doesn't actually require any behaviors, just some basic manipulation of their x coordinate. So I'm going to add an event, system, is boolean set, race started, true, and then we're going to add an action to our horse, scroll down, and we're going to set the X position. Now we need to take the current X position, and in my first demo of this, I actually just used the random function to just pick a number between, say, 0 and 5. Now the problem I had with this is, even though it is random, because we're doing about 1,000 movements across the whole race, you start getting to a stage where it feels less random, because when you add up all those random numbers, they get very close to each other. So a way that I actually came up to add a bit more randomness to it is actually using the choose function. Now the choose function lets you basically just put a load of values and it picks one of those values. So if we do something like putting 5 zeros, each with a comma apart, and then putting 3 ones, 2 twos, and a 3, something like this, actually we get something that's a lot more random, because a certain horse might get a 3 5 or 6 times in a race, while another horse might only get it once, and that can make a big difference. So this is my personal method that I've used, and again it just means that there's a bit more separation of the horses in the race, and it also means that a horse that might be quite far behind might roll a couple of 3s and then they get pushed much further ahead. Makes for a bit more exciting race. So we're going to hit done. Next we need to do a check for the race ending, and for this it's quite simple. We're just going to say if horse is overlapping another object and the checkered flag. And we're just going to take that race started and just flip that boolean again. So we're just going to set boolean race started to false. And that will now stop our race, stop this code from working, and the race will end. That's where we can add our text. Now before we add our text, I just want to make a note of something that I've done to the flag hitbox. So I've gone to the hitbox here and I've just shrunk it down. This means the horse has to be quite far over the checkered flag before it triggers. If you have it set to the bounding box, so it covers this full space, what ends up happening as soon as the nose of the horse touches the finish line, the race ends. It just looks a little bit silly. So this just means the horse has to cross it a little bit further before this trigger activates. Now we also had some text to show who the winner was. So we can just insert a new object, scroll down to a text option, and we can grab the winner. Now I just made this text quite big, so I'm just going to place it around about this size, move it up to about 50, and set the initial text to nothing. Then go back to our event sheet. We're just going to add an action to our winner text, set text, and it's going to be horse dot animation name. Now again, this only triggers when a horse is overlapping the flag, which means it's only going to show the horse that crossed the line first. Now we could just show the color, but we want to add a bit more information, so we're going to add the and sign, speech marks, put a space, and just wins. So if yellow crossed the line, it will say yellow wins. Finally, we need some sort of check to see if we were correct. So we've got the variable selected horse, which again, we store at the very start. So we also need to make use of that variable. So I'm going to right click and add in a blank sub event, double click on it, and we're going to go down to a system variable, and we're going to compare variable. We're just going to say if selected horse is equal to horse dot animation name. The horse that crossed the line, is it the same as the one we selected? Now at this point you can do a number of things. You can show different text, but what I'm going to do is do something really simple, and I'm going to create a variable called money. And it's going to be a number, and let's start off with 50. 50 money. And if I selected the right horse, then I'm going to do system. I'm going to add to money by 10, for instance. So I get 10 money back because I selected the correct horse. Again, this is the simple version. You can make this far more complex. We're also going to make it so when you select your horse and the race starts, we're going to take that money and we're just going to subtract a small value from it. So subtract from money, and let's go from 2. Let's be really generous for this. So actually the odds should be on your side. You shouldn't be ever losing money on this game because again, it takes 2 money to play, which means you get 5 goes. There's only 4 horses. And we can even create another text box to display our money. So I'm just going to grab a new text box, place it here at the bottom. And what I like to do, if I know that certain text is going to go there, I actually like to write the text that's going to go there. So money and then 50, just so I can see what it looks like and I can visualize it a bit better. I'm just going to up the font size as well, so it's a little bit bigger, and we'll put it down here at the bottom. In our event sheet then, just to display our money, we're going to go to system, every tick, and this is probably not the most efficient way of doing it, but it's a very short game, a very small game, so it's fine. And we're just going to set the text and just what we wrote before, money colon space, but instead of actually writing 50, we're just going to use the and sign and write money, and this will get the value from our global variable. So let's do a test. So now we have to select our horse. I'm going to go for green this time. The race will now start. It's took 2 money off me. You see the horses are a little bit random in the way they move, a bit more spread apart, and red has won. Now, even though we adjusted the hitbox, I think the overlap function doesn't actually check for hitboxes. So you might just want to have another square that you check for instead of the flag. But what I'm going to do now is, this is the basic version. I'm going to tidy this up, make it look like a real application, and then let's look at some advanced features we can add to this. So after a little bit of tidying up, we've now got something that looks a little bit more professional, and the logic's still the same. I've just added in some sprites, and I've just moved some of our text down to these bottom options here. So if I select my horse, I've added it so it shows the horse at the bottom, and it'll show the winner at the bottom as well. So you can see in this case, yellow was our winner, red was very close. And I want to recreate the feel of sort of classic arcade carnival games that I used to see when I was a kid and still love to this day. So let's add some advanced features to this now. First thing we're going to do is actually not that advanced, but we're going to add some bobbing effects to the horses, and this is really easy to do. We're just going to add a sign behavior to our horse. Now, the properties that we need, we're going to set it on the vertical. The period 2 is probably about best, and the magnitude I've done about 5. But again, play around with these options, see what's best for you. We're also going to make sure that it's not enabled, because we only want this behavior to be enabled when the race starts. So going into our event sheets, we can add this really easily. When the race starts, we're going to add an action to our horses, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to set the sign behavior to be enabled. When the race finishes at the end, we just do the opposite. So we go back to our horse, go back to the sign behavior, and we just set this to be disabled. Really nice bobbing effect, really simple, really effective. The next thing we want to change is actually this part. You can see that we've got our logic for what are the odds of the horse moving. But what if we had a better system where different horses had different odds of moving and had different payouts based on that? I remember this very fondly from a Fable game where there was this one chicken you could bet on, and it didn't move at all, but it had a very slim chance of moving 100 places forward. And what you just see is this chicken not move and then randomly move halfway across the field, and then not move and then randomly move again. And it's worth a lot of money if you bet on this chicken, but it didn't win most of the time. So let's see if we can implement a system like this. First thing we need to do is go to the right side, go down to files, and we're going to add an array. This is going to keep track of all of our different odds. So what we're going to say is for every horse, it has 10 different odds, but you can add more to this, and we've got 4 different horses. And we can even right click and rename these. So if I just go down to rename row, we can call this red, for instance. Just helps us keep track of what horses. And for the red horse, we can just keep the same logic we had before, which was 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, and I actually had a third one. So let me just increase my width. Let's go for 11. And again, you can play around with this and get the feel for what you want. We can then introduce my really, really silly horse, which I don't think 100 is going to quite work for this one. So I'm going to scale it down slightly to 50. In fact, 50 might even be a little bit overpowered. Let's go 20. And again, we can play around with each of those numbers. So if I take another one, and I'm going to make this one a little bit worse. I'm going to give it a couple more 3s, but make the rest 0s. And then final horse, I'm going to have a copy and paste of the first one. And again, we can rename these for our different horses. We also want the payout for this. So I'm going to introduce one more option on the side here. And again, if you need to, rename your columns. So this is going to be payout. And for this, we'll keep it really simple with just how much gold you get if you bet on this. So we're going to say for a standard horse, you get 5. So that's our top and bottom. For this one, I feel like its odds might be slightly worse. So I'm going to bring this up to 8. And this one I'm going to bring to 10. So different odds for different horses. In order to add this to our event sheet, we first need 2 objects. The first one is an array. So this is going to copy our data from the file into an array itself. And the next one we need is Ajax. And this is just going to allow us to go from the file section into our array and do that copy and paste when the game starts. Moving into the event sheet then, we're going to add an event system. And we're going to do an on start of layout. Go to add action, go to Ajax, and request a project file. Now, mine is just called new array. You can obviously give this a much better name. I'm not going to bother with a tag. It's the only file we're dealing with. Once we've got that, we can add a new event again to Ajax on complete. I'm going to check for our blank tag. And once we've got that, we can go to our array, go to loads, and we can load in the Ajax last data. Now this is something that I use a lot in a lot of different projects that I've worked on, so you might have seen me do this before. If you've never done this before, really great skill to learn because it's used in so many games, and anytime you're using lots of storage, learn how to use arrays essentially. Next, we need to actually apply the correct row to the correct horse. So to do this, we're going to click on the horse and add an instance variable. So you can do this at the side, or you can right click and add an instance variable this way. And we're going to do array number. And default's going to be 0, and we're just going to click on these and just add one to them each time. Essentially, this is what odd set they're using, which means you don't actually have to name these red, yellow, green, etc. You can just have a series of different odds made up, and then you can assign one to a horse that you choose to, either at the start of the game, or if you're making this more of a full game, you can then have different odds for different horses throughout the game. But we'll keep it really simple. 0, 1, 2, 3. Which row do you want it? I'm just going to go that for each of the different horses. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. So it's all while assigning them. We do need to actually get this working in our event sheet, and that's a little bit more tricky. So we're going to go to this code here on race started, and we're going to add in a sub event. This is going to be a system sub event, and we're going to do for each, and we're going to choose each horse. And now this is the really annoying bit. I haven't got a better way of doing this. If you can think of a better way, please let me know. But what we're going to do is, instead of choosing 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., but we're going to do our array dot at. We're going to write 0, comma, and then horse dot array number. We're then going to close the bracket, press comma, and now we need to do that again for 11 more times. Again, really not the best way of doing this. There is definitely a better way. Each time we copy and paste this, we're going to put the number up by 1 until we get to 11. So I'm going to quickly time lapse this until it's done. And we're actually just going to 10 here. So once you get to the last one, remove the comma and then close the final bracket. Everything should be colorized if done correctly. And that is by far the worst bit of construct code I've ever wrote, but let's carry on. So finally then, once we've got it to choose the right values, we also want to get our money back if we selected the right horse. So instead of adding 10 money, what we're going to then do is go to array dot at. So the money is in slot 11, comma, and then we just take horse dot array number, and that'll get our money back for us. And the final thing, we just want a way to maybe restart the game. So I'm just going to add one more event. I'm just on a right mouse click, but you can choose whatever you like. And restarting is really easy. We're just going to restart the layout. So scroll down, restart layout. We're going to make one small change to this, and it's just changing one variable back, which is our selected horse. We don't care about the others because our money needs to change. Our money needs to stay the same from round to round. So if you've gained money, you should keep that. If you've lost money, you should keep that as well. And the restart state is already back to false because the race has ended. And just quickly, after some testing, I found one broken thing, and that is this bit of code. You just need to add another condition to it, and it is trigger once while true. If not, it keeps triggering over and over again, which means you get infinite money, which is great if you're the one ending the money, not great from a gameplay point of view. So let's do one final test. So now we've got our different horses. I'm going to pick the aqua horse, and you can see it move and jump about. And it's quite powerful, but it doesn't always move, so sometimes it gets a bit stuck. But I did win, so I get some money. Can right click, reset the playing field. This time, I'm going to go for red this time. And I think I've chose wrong. No, maybe. And oh, it's yellow. You can see how this is quite a fun little game to play. And again, try it out for yourself. I'll leave a link in the description of the video and on the Patreon page. But that is it for our first Carnival game. Let's move on to our next one. Our next Carnival game is the shooting range, where you've got to try and knock down all the ducks. Now I'm going to put a timer on this to see who can shoot the ducks down in the fastest time possible, and the ducks are going to be moving across the screen. So first two sprites that you need is a reticle of some sorts and a duck. I'm going to remove the duck for now because I don't need it, but it's still there on the right side. And we also need one more object, and that is going to be our mouse, because that is going to be how we're going to control our reticle. So let's start off with the really simple bit, moving this with the mouse. So I'm going to add an event, system, every tick, and this first action does not need to be every tick. You can do this on start of layout, but just for reducing code down for the video's sake, we'll put it on every tick. I'm going to go to our mouse and set the cursor style. Now currently set to normal, which means the current cursor that you see on my screen right now, that is the one that you'll see. I'm going to change this to none, which means we no longer have a cursor when the game starts and when the game's being played. Instead, what we want to do is take our crosshair and we want to set the position of it. And this is going to be set to mouse X and mouse Y. So now our mouse is our reticle. Next, we'll bring our duck back in, and we want to get our duck to move across the screen. Now, when the duck moves across the screen in the shooting range, what normally happens is it gets to the very edge of the screen, it goes round some sort of conveyor belt and comes right to the other side. Now, I'm not going to mess about programming a conveyor belt in. I'm going to make use of one behavior, which is going to be the wrap behavior. And this kind of does the same job for us. So if it does leave the screen, it'll just go back on the other side. I'm also going to add another behavior to get this moving, and we're going to add the 8 directions behavior. Now, in terms of the 8 directions behavior, you can play around with the different options there, but we're just going to set the angle to no. Obviously, change the speed whichever way you want. We can also change it to only move left and right if we want to. But again, this doesn't matter because we're going to turn default controls off. So that's our duck set up. Now it's currently set to warp layout, which is fine because I've shrunk my layout down. So if you've not shrunk your layout down, just make sure you change that here. And let's move on to getting this moving. So we're going to add an event, and we can do this on the every tick. I'm actually going to add a second every tick just to split our code up, but we can definitely do this in these same actions. And we're just going to take our duck, simulate control, and simulate right. Now if we do a test, you'll see our duck moves across the screen and comes out the other side and keeps moving. And we can also move our reticle. Now some problems we've got. First of all, our reticle gets hidden behind the ducks. And we've only got ducks that move to the right. I might also want ducks that move to the left. So let's set that up as well. So starting off with our reticle, we're just going to add an action, crosshair, scroll to the bottom and move to the top. Nice easy fix. The duck is a little bit more complicated. What I'm going to do is right click and add an instance variable. Now this instance variable I'm going to call right and set it as a boolean and tick it on. And if this is ticked on, the duck's going to move to the right. If it's ticked off, the duck's going to move to the left. So we can have ducks on different levels moving in different directions. So we need to do a check for that. So I'm just going to right click and add a blank sub event. On that, I'm going to do duck and check its boolean value and check if it's on the right. If it is, move right. I'm going to copy and paste this, right click. If it's not right, I'm going to move left. And in terms of saving code, actually what we can do now is take both of these and we'll put them under this every tick instead, because it's still separated enough for me where they're not sort of combining themselves. But where possible, especially if you've got the events to spare, separate code even though they do the same action. Just makes your life a little bit more easier. So now we can place our ducks in, and the easiest way to do this is whack the grid on. And I'll start with the top row and place the top row in and decide how many ducks you want and how spread apart you are for them and how spread apart they are. I'm just going to sort of fill this whole space with ducks, so I'll quickly come back once that's done. So now I've got the top row of ducks done. I'm just going to copy and paste them below and do the same for a third row. And I think 3 rows is absolutely fine. I don't think we need any more than that. Now I'm going to take this middle row, highlight all of them. I'm going to untick the right one, so these move left. Now, even though they're going to move left, they're still going to face the right. So we're just going to go back to our event sheet and add one more bit of code in for this section, which is just going to check which way it's facing and just mirror the duck if you need to. So for moving right, we're going to do not mirrored, and for moving left, we're going to do mirrored. So before we do our test, we'll do one more bit of code first. We're going to add an event. Now you've got two options here. You can either do mouse on object clicked. Now this is very precise shooting, which means it's going to be much harder to hit the ducks. Or you can do crosshair is overlapping. And this is a lot more generous because you've got a bigger range to click between. So I'm going to use the crosshair if crosshairs overlapping duck. Now for the crosshair one, we also need a way to trigger this action. So we're going to do mouse on click. So have you click the mouse and it's the crosshair overlapping the duck. And this one's really simple. We're just going to destroy the duck. So duck.destroy. Now if we do a test, you can see we've got a lot of ducks on the screen, and I might want to make this crosshair a bit smaller because you can see I can actually take out 2 ducks. So you could say I've got a shotgun, but I just think I'm getting very lucky because the game's not programmed properly. So I'm going to make my crosshair a bit smaller. But you can see our ducks are slowly disappearing, and our last few are on the screen and gone. So you can see we're nearly there, but we still need to actually track our time. How long did it take to take out all the ducks? And we need some sort of reset system. So let's quickly put these 2 parts in now. So first thing I've done is made my reticle a bit smaller, but let's now go to the timer. So I'm going to insert a new object, scroll down to text, and I've got a text object I'm just going to call timer. Place it somewhere. I'm going to place it at the bottom here. And I'm just going to call that 0 and set the size a little bit bigger. On the event sheet then, we're just going to add a global variable called timer, start it at 0. So now we've got a global variable called timer, we've got a text called timer, we can add in the logic, and the logic's actually really, really simple. We're going to go to system, scroll down, and pick this every X seconds. Now, we can set the interval to be 1 second, but I want this to be a bit more accurate than just to the nearest second. So I'm going to go 0.01. I'm going to add an action, system, and we need to add to our timer by 0.01. And then finally, we can set the text of our timer as well. So set text, timer, and that's all set up. Finally, we need a way to stop the game once all the ducks have been destroyed. So we're going to add one more global variable, and this is going to be called game ended. This will be a boolean, and by default we're actually going to set this to true. Even though the game's not ended yet, we're going to make use of this so the timer doesn't start straight away. So going to our timer, we're going to add an action, system is boolean set game ended, and right click and change this to false. So now when the game starts, the timer will not start straight away. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to say on left click when overlapping a duck, system set boolean game ended to false. This will now start our timer, so the timer doesn't start now until you shoot the first duck. Then what we're going to do is just add a quick event. This is going to be system, compare 2 variables. I'm going to take our duck.count. Now count will just get how many ducks there are on the screen. If that is equal to 0, then the game is over. So we're just going to add an action, set boolean, game ended is true. There's no way to actually turn that back to false because the only way you can turn that back to false is by shooting a duck, and there's no ducks left. So that will end the game. It will stop the timer. You can see your score. And then finally, we can just do what we did on our last one, which is just check when you right click. And then we can restart the layout. And when we restart the layout, we also want to reset our global variables. Now, if you've got global variables you want to keep, so let's say you're adding this to our horse program from last time, you want to keep the money, then obviously just do each one manually. For ease, I'm just going to reset all of them and of course restart the layout as well. And that is our duck game finished, but like I did with the horse game, I'm now going to go back through, tie this up, make it look like a more professional program. So I'll be back soon. And finally, once it's all done, we end up with something like this. Again, taking some time to go back and change the look and the feel of your game really adds a lot to it. I normally try and add the mechanics first, and then if I like the mechanics, I'll then add the other elements to it, such as the design stuff. But here's our shooting range. Works just as before. We shoot the duck, a timer starts, we then have to try and shoot as many as possible. I've added in a water effect at the back. I've also added in sort of a size difference between the ducks to make it a little bit more interesting. I can also change the speed of the individual ducks. That could make it a bit more interesting, so the back rows are a little bit faster, and because they're smaller, that's going to be much harder. But we end of our time, right click, we can start it all again. So really simple but effective mini game to add into your game, or again with a bit more work to be a full game as well. That's been a couple of days since I recorded the last parts, and that's because I've been a little bit under the weather. I'm still not great, so for this last part, just to get it out on time, I'm going to show you how the code works, put it in the description, but I'm not going to do a full tutorial just to make sure you get this video on time. So this final code is Free Card Monty. If you're not aware of this one, it's also known as Find the Queen, and essentially if we click on our queen, you've got to keep track of it, and well, let's just see how well you do. So the way this program works is it picks 2 random cards on the screen and swaps them over, and it keeps getting faster and faster and faster until it eventually swaps. And did you keep track of it? Just here. So let's have a look how the code works for this. So starting off with the layout, we've got 3 different cards, and these are 3 different objects. So you can see card 1, card 2, card 3, and each of these cards have 2 animations, the back and the front. So it will be the same card faces each time you see when you play this. Onto our event sheet. This looks really confusing. It's not as bad as it looks. So first of all, we've got this function called swap cards, and this is doing the bulk of our logic. So essentially we're going to pick one of our 3 random cards. Now this is joined by a family, and when we pick a card, we're going to set the first card, card 1. This is the only one we actually need to set as the object type name, and we're also going to store its X position as X1. We're then going to pick a second card, as long as it's not the one that is stored in card number 1. So this is just doing a quick check going, have we selected this one already? If so, pick a different one. And that second card, we're going to store its X position, and then we're going to tween it to where the first card was. So it's now moving to card 1's position. We then make use of that variable that's storing card 1 once again, and then we're going to pick card 1 and move it to where card 2 was. So again, if you're still confused by this, essentially all these 5 lines of code are doing are picking 2 cards and getting them to swap positions. Once we've got that logic out the way, then we don't actually need the keyboard to press A. That was just a bit of testing that I did, but we set all the cards to face the front so we can see them. When you click any of them, we show the back of the cards instead, and we set the Boolean game started to true. And then we keep moving the cards while speed is greater than max speed. So the max speed is how fast the final rotations will be. 0.3 is kind of good. I think it's still a little bit easy. However, if you go too low, it becomes impossible. The cards move too fast when they swap over that you can't see it. So have a play around with this number and see how you feel about it. Now every time we swap over, we're using the tween function, and we start at a speed of 1 second, and every time we do a swap, we subtract 0.05 until we get to that max speed of 0.3. And then once we obviously get to speed being less than the max speed, we stop it all and we ask the user to select their card. Select the right card, you win, and then we can restart the layout. So really simple program here. I'll leave it in the description and you can try it out for yourself. So that's going to be it for our 3 different Carnival games. Let me know on the Patreon comments which one was your favourite. There'll be a link for the code for all 3 of them so you can try them out for yourself. And I'll see you in the next video.